All right, welcome everybody. Hello and welcome to Teaching Web Design today. We have some people joining us yet, so we're going to let our numbers settle down before we get started. Hey, Nancy. I'm just looking at our participants and I recognize a ton of names. Welcome. And you can all go ahead and start tossing your introductions into chat. We love to see where you're all coming from. And I haven't told this to anybody else on the team. And Kent, I didn't mention this to you yet either. I actually started making a map to see where all of our CodeHS teachers are coming from. So I'm going to definitely share that with everybody. All of you will find a way to share it. But I love seeing that. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Hey, Jim. Hey, Brenda. Oh, let me find my mouse. There we go. And I'm told that I'm just a little bit laggy today, and I don't doubt that. I have some weather happening here, and sometimes that impacts what happens on my internet. So once we get going, I'm going to go ahead and shut my video off just to make sure that I stay connected or try to help myself stay connected. All right, welcome everybody. Hello. We're going to get started shortly. We still have people joining, so this is so exciting. Awesome. Yeah, go ahead and toss your introductions into chat. And while you're doing that too, oh, this is so cool. I love seeing this. So we've got Wisconsin. Oh, Bahamas. Seriously, who's in the Bahamas? I want to be in the Bahamas too. I think Joni and I think that's where we need to work from, Joni. Hello. Awesome. Arizona. Welcome. Nigeria. Hey, I saw you on our map yesterday when I was mapping our locations. That is so exciting. Welcome. Welcome, Pennsylvania. Oh, so jealous of the Bahamas. Welcome. Oh, New York and moving to Colorado. Excellent. I'll be heading to Colorado later this month. Welcome, Utah. Love that state. I think Joni's heading to Utah later this summer sometime. Welcome, Canada. India, hello. Kentucky. Missouri, Mississippi, Qatar, hello. Awesome. Yeah, Kent is coming to us from Texas as well. Oh, we got a few more people joining us. So awesome to see so many of you join us today for this workshop, and you are definitely in for a real treat. Oh, sweating in Arkansas. It's actually cooler for me today. So I'll take it for the day that we get it. Not going to be sad about missing out on the heat. Hello, Atlanta. I'll be heading to Atlanta actually in a couple of weeks. I need to just do a whole CodeHS meetup somewhere, I think. All right, so let's see. I think our numbers might be settling down. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll have Joni watch that on the back end, and I'll go ahead and get us started. So again, welcome everybody. Welcome to Teaching Web Design. My name's Lori, and I'm a PD specialist here at CodeHS. I know a lot of you, but for those that don't know me, I've been at CodeHS for over 2 years now. And prior to coming to CodeHS, I was in K-12 education for 20 years. For all those years, I was a district technology coordinator. And for 10 of those years, I was a high school computer science teacher, got to do some middle school, got to do some elementary, and pretty much all with CodeHS. So I am very excited to be here with you today. Web design was one of the classes that I taught, and it was so much fun. It can be such a great class to get kids excited and engaged with computer science and get them excited about the creative side of programming and computer science. So I'm very excited that we get to bring this to you today. And I'm even more excited that we have our fabulous teacher trainer, Kent Pendleton, with us. Kent is an amazing computer science teacher. I often tell him, I wish I could be in your classroom. I want to see you teach to your kids because I get so engaged and so excited about the content he brings us during workshops. I cannot imagine what it must be like for his kids to be lucky enough to be with him every day. So Kent will be taking us through his teaching web design workshop, and he's going to take a really cool, unique perspective on this. So I'm very excited that you're here for this today. I think you're going to love it. And we also have with us, helping us with all the questions in the chat and everything else, we have Joni, and Joni is another PD specialist, and she's waving at you right now, and she's going to be helping me out with throwing some links into chat and answering some questions for us as we go. There we go. A few more people joining. Oh, I love this group. This is awesome. So good to see all of you. Hey, Zach, it's good to see you back. Hello, hello. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in, maybe. I think I'm getting just a little bit laggy again, so I might shut my video off just to try to lessen the demand on my bandwidth. So while I'm trying to make that happen, if you have not introduced yourself yet, by all means, feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in chat. And if you'd like, even if you've already introduced yourself, if you would like to go ahead and tell us a little bit about what your experience is with web design. Have you taught HTML before? How comfortable do you feel with it? And what subjects do you teach? Is this new for you? Maybe you're just coming to CodeHS for the first time this year. So, and yes, this will be recorded. We absolutely record all of these, and I'll make sure that you all also have the link to the full YouTube playlist as well, so you have access to all of these. And just to double check, yep, I am recording. Then I get nervous. As soon as somebody asks, I worry. Did I click record? All right. So, oh, you bet, Darlene. Hey, it's great to see you back, Darlene. All right. Anthony teaches geometry. No, perfect. All right. Web development, web design and development, fundamentals of computing. Oh, thank you, Shannon. Thank you for the CodeHS love. Appreciate that. All right, Mohammed, haven't taught any web development course. Cool. You're going to love this. You're going to love it. Let's see. Camille, I've worked in marketing and web design for years. Awesome. First time teaching and first time with CodeHS. We are so excited to have you with us today. You're going to love it. Oh, cool. Amy, thankfully found CodeHS a couple of years ago when programming and web design was thrown at me. Oh, thank you, Amy. So I think that's how both Joni and I felt when we found CodeHS, like, okay, maybe I can do this. Awesome. Hillary, former web developer, now a teacher. Cool. Excellent. So happy to have you with us, Hillary. Patrice, computer and technology. Excellent. We all went to college for graphic design. Awesome. Nicole teaches algebra and geometry. First time teaching a web design course. Cool. Walter, web design, Adobe products, accounting. Oh, excellent. Using Dreamweaver. No experience teaching web design. Let's see. Cool. So we've got a mix. We've got some folks who are have taught web design, some who have never taught it. I think you're going to love it. I do truly believe web design is a great entry point, whether you are a teacher or a student, and whatever your level of experience is. This was definitely one of the first things that I ever learned how to, I guess really the first thing I learned how to program were web pages. And I always felt like, okay, maybe I can do this. Oh, let's see. Cool. Darlene teaches CS to high school students with autism. I think this is a phenomenal course for students with autism. I had several students with autism in my classes, and this was one of the courses that they really fell in love with and got engaged with. Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much. Go ahead and keep tossing those introductions into chat. I'd love to see what your experience is, and this will definitely help too. As Chip, or as I started calling you Chip, as Kent, oh my gosh, as Kent starts preparing for his to go through his sandbox. Cool. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going, but feel free to go ahead and keep tossing your introductions into chat. Joni and Kent, are you hearing me okay yet? Are we good? Okay, I'm going to leave my video off because I think it's helping. So, all right. So our first link of our session today is for the slides today. So you may want to browse out to codehs.com/webdesign-slides and go ahead and grab those slide decks or this slide deck. There are going to be some links in the slide deck that might be helpful today. Kent has done a ton of cool different sandboxes for our workshop today. So you will want to be able to grab those links. And if you are not in a good place to grab the slides right now, no worries, because I'll make sure you get the link after the workshop too. I'll send this out in the follow-up email with the recording. And it's also in the workshop section, which we'll be enrolling all of you in shortly. All right, I'll leave this here for a second if you want to grab that QR code, if you do happen to have a mobile device with you. Okay.
And I threw that link into chat, guys, so you can click on it there.
Perfect, Joni. Thank you. I'm going to move my chat so I can see it. There we go. All right. So next link, question parking lot. Because we have a lot of people on this call, we want to make sure that we are not losing your questions in chat. So for any questions at all, any questions today, please go ahead and open up the question parking lot and toss those questions there. We are going to keep an eye on those. Joni and myself will be watching that and trying to answer questions as we go through the workshop. If something comes up or a question comes up that we think, yeah, we need to answer this one live, we'll toss that out to Kent and we can all answer that live as well. And if there's something that we can't answer, we'll make sure that we can get an answer for you and send that back your way after the workshop. So definitely use that question parking lot. That is going to help us out a ton. We so appreciate it. And that way we can really keep chat freed up for conversation. We always like to connect. So let's definitely try to use this parking lot today. All right, so we're going through our check-in right now. And again, welcome everybody. I'm so very, very glad you could join us today. In just a few moments, I'm going to take us through the just a quick overview of not intro to CS and Python. How did I not notice that? I am going to take you through a quick overview of the web design course. There will be no Python in this workshop today. So, and I will fix that lovely slide a little bit later. Then Kent is going to take us through the sandbox program that he created for this workshop. So I'm so excited for y'all to see that. Now, I've also included a few slides and resources on course customization too. And I'm going to include that in the course or in the actual workshop section and add a few other resources for you there too. Depends on how much time we have, because I definitely want to give as much time as we can to Kent's part of this presentation today. And then we will wrap up in just a couple of hours. Okay, so teachers, if you are just joining us for the first time, you've never used CodeHS before, we would love for you to go ahead and set up your free teacher account by browsing to codehs.com/signup. And Joni's going to toss that link into chat for us as well. And so this is only needed if you do not have a CodeHS account. So codehs.com/signup. It'll take just a minute or two to set up your free teacher account. And if you are just setting up your account for the first time, be aware that we do go through a verification process just to make sure that we are only giving teachers access to the solution references. So that'll take just a little bit to get that taken care of for you, but we get those done pretty quickly. Then once you've created your account, or if you have an account, we would love for you to go ahead and sign into CodeHS and join our workshop section. So Joni's going to toss this link into chat as well, because it's a little bit longer. Once you sign into CodeHS, you can browse to codehs.com/go/8EEC1 to join the section. And that's going to enroll you in our workshop section for today. I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this real quick. I might be really taxing my bandwidth right now to try to do this, but I want to see who we've got so far. Oh, here we go. I always love how fast you all are. Our CodeHS educators are so speedy. So it looks like you're getting enrolled really quickly here, so that's perfect. And if you have any troubles at all, either creating an account or enrolling into the workshop section, please go ahead and add that question into the parking lot as well, because that will let us address you and make sure that we don't miss that. We want to make sure you get in the section too. Perfect. Awesome, everybody. Once you're in the section, you're going to see something that looks similar to this. Not quite the same. I'm looking at this from the teacher view, but I added a ton of stuff. So in addition to the workshop resources, which let me see if I can go ahead and open that. I think it's being just a little bit cranky for me because I'm trying to refresh too many things on my screen right now. But in the workshop resources, you're going to see that the slides are here. The survey is here. And most importantly is Kent's web design sandbox folder is here too. So when you click on this, you're going to be able to see all of those links for the sandbox, for Kent's sandbox, and you'll be able to access all of his different sandboxes here too. Okay. So one more link. Now, we need everybody to go ahead and click on the attendance link for today. So codehs.com/webdesign-attend. And that is going to check you into the workshop and also let me send you a certificate for 2 hours, certificate of attendance or certificate of completion for 2 hours for this workshop. So you can expect to see the certificates to be emailed out to everybody by later today. I'd say by 5 p.m. Central at the latest, you should have those. And those will be coming from the hello@codehs.com email address. So if you're not seeing that come through by tomorrow morning, just send me an email and I'll make sure that you get that. And Joni has tossed that into chat as well. And I'll go ahead and click it. You can see what happens when I click it. This should be the page that you see. Teaching web design. Thanks for letting us know you attended this event. It collects no information other than your name. And it lets me, most importantly, send you a certificate of completion. Okay. All righty. So I think we are good to go. I don't see any questions. Team, if you saw any questions that I missed, go ahead and stop me. But otherwise, I'm going to jump into our workshop.
Hey, Lori.
Yeah.
Lori. Yeah, just want to mention, you guys, as you get into that workshop session, you are in as a student. And so you will need to make sure that you toggle on the left-hand side of your dashboard to student, and then you'll be able to see your workshop section at that point.
Perfect. I'm glad you mentioned that, Joni. So, yep, you will be in as a student, like Joni said. So you will want to switch. And I have a few more things here. So you want to click on student there. You can also see it by clicking on my sections and scrolling all the way to the bottom of your the student sections. Perfect. Let us know if you have any trouble with that, and I can definitely help you get into that. All right. And Joni, I'm going to have you toss into chat one more time, please, the link to the slides. I think we had a couple of people joining us. Denise, which web page? The one for the section, or? Okay, once you join the section, all you need to do is sign back into CodeHS. And once you sign in, if you are taken to your sections page, like most often teachers are, then you can just click on this little computer up at the top, little computer logo, and that will actually take you, well, actually for teachers, that might not take you back to there. I would say definitely check, click on the drop down and choose student, and that will take you into all of the courses that you are enrolled in as a student. All right. Go ahead and toss any questions that you have into that question parking lot again, and we'll go ahead and jump into our course overview. Okay. So today we're going to take a quick look at the web design course. So we actually have a few different web design courses, and we have some pathways. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what you're going to see in CodeHS as you're thinking about teaching with this curriculum. So the web design course is basically a project-based course, and you're really going to be teaching students how to build their own web pages using HTML and CSS. So students really are going to be able to finish this course and create a fully functioning website as well. So let's go ahead and take a look. Oh, and one more thing, there are no prerequisites, that's easy enough to say, right, for taking the web design course. This can be an entry-level course. In fact, this is something that I've used with middle school students, and we have versions specifically for middle school students, and I've used it all the way through high school. So you can see where the web design course lands in our course pathway. We have a full 6 through 12 pathway, or a suggested pathway. So if you happen to be in a school district that doesn't have a pathway currently, or maybe you are in a state that doesn't have any requirements or any required pathways for computer science, you can definitely take a look at the pathway that CodeHS suggests. And Jody just tossed the link into chat for this as well. And you can see this starts at 6th grade and goes all the way through the 12th grade year. And we have quite a few different courses in here. We start out with an intro to programming with Carol the dog, or Python. And we've also got an introduction to the internet and world of computing, where kids could actually start getting a little bit of web design. Then we have a web design course that is actually a suggestion for 7th grade. This one happens to be the Matisse version, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But that one is really designed for middle school students. And then if we come into the 9th grade year, we can see that web design Picasso is the version that we recommend for high school. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll show you the difference in those in just a moment. And then we can see the courses that we recommend for those upper high school levels, including things like fundamentals of cyber, APCSA, mobile apps. There's actually another course that I would add into that, and that would be a web development course too. That's a perfect course for after web design. So some of the other pathways that we have that maybe focus a little bit more on actually using that web design are things like the cybersecurity pathway, where you can start students on that web design course in 9th grade, or alternate it with this JavaScript course also, and continue with a more of a cybersecurity pathway. There's also a mobile apps pathway where you can get students into web design around that 10th grade year, and then follow it up with mobile apps. So web design is going to be a really good precursor to getting them into mobile apps as well. Now, if you want them to really focus in on web development, a possible pathway for that is starting them with web design in that Picasso version, and then leading them through to get into web development. So when we're talking about these different courses, this is one of the most common questions we get. Which course should I choose? We have these different flavors, we like to call them. So the Picasso flavor of web design is really designed for our high school students. And so this is the one that I've most often taught with at the high school level, and I'll take you out to the course catalog in just a moment to show you this. The Monet version is actually a 1-semester course, and then we have Matisse as well, which is the one that is really geared toward middle school. So I'm going to take you out to the course catalog. There we go. I apologize, didn't have that pulled up in advance, so we'll see how long that takes to get there. But we're going to head to codehs.com/course/catalog. And Joni, just toss that into chat for us. So once you're at the course catalog, we can scroll through and actually search for the web design, or we can search by typing in the keywords up here. So if I just search for web design, we're going to see a few things come up. You'll notice computing ideas is in here. This does include some introductory web design. This is actually a really cool course. If you want to give students an overview of a lot of different computer science topics. And if you're familiar with exploring computer science, that curriculum, this is actually a course that very closely mirrors that as well. Then we have web design in Picasso. This was the one I have used a lot with my own high school students. So this is designed for a full year-long course, so 140 contact hours. And if we take a look at the units here, we can see what is included in this course. We start with just what is the web? And we talk about some of the issues around the internet, how it functions, how it impacts society. And we do that before we get into HTML. So there's a unit on HTML, CSS, and then a project unit as well. And I'm going to show you something really cool you can do with those projects. Then we have some advanced HTML and CSS, another project, and it goes into some additional complex topics here like Bootstrap. I actually love Bootstrap quite a bit. This is something really fun, but can be challenging. This is definitely one of the reasons that this is more of a high school level course, is because of the Bootstrap. And then some designing user interfaces and a final project as well. There's also additional supplemental material in that course. Now, some of the other flavors that we were talking about, let's see if I can find Matisse. So here is our Matisse course. So it's a year-long course, again, geared a little bit lower, so middle school. So if I take a look at the units here, you're going to see some of those similar units, including structuring websites, CSS, creating home pages, HTML, CSS, and some other topics as well. And again, that one does not have the Bootstrap because it is geared toward a younger age of student. Now, if we look at Monet, we'll also see that this is a semester-long course. So this one, in case you're just teaching it for a semester, you don't have to take the Picasso course and figure out how to actually cut that back for a semester. But you can actually just choose Monet, and that will give you all the content you need for that semester at the high school level as well. So again, we just kind of looked at that module breakdown. The course that we would really be thinking about in particular today is the Picasso version, so that high school level version. And again, it's really because we have that additional Bootstrap content in this course. So again, we'll start with getting started. What is the web? And then we'll get into some of that HTML and CSS content. And we get our first project to create a homepage. Now, one of the things I do want to point out here, and this is something that often gets forgotten about, even by teachers who've used CodeHS for years and years, and that is the CodeHS.me homepages. One thing that I want to make sure you all take away from this workshop is that CodeHS does provide everybody, all users, so teachers and students alike, free and pro alike, with the space to actually create your own websites. I've included some information in the slide deck for how to access this, and I'll just show you really briefly where this is at. You'll find it in the sandbox, and you can see from the GIF there what that's going to look like. Sometimes you do have to change your username. So if your username happens to be your email address, you'll have to get rid of that little @ sign. So if I jump out to my sandbox, you'll see here that I can edit my homepage by clicking on this link. And it's going to take its time, so I'm not going to wait for it, but this is where you can go to get to that. So we'll definitely make sure that you have the links to some of the knowledge base articles here as well. Joni has just tossed an article into chat for creating your personal homepage on CodeHS. And we also wanted to make sure we include information about how to change that web page URL. And really, it's just about updating your username. Now, if you're not sure about how updating your username might impact you, say if your students are joining with a Google login or something like that, you can definitely reach out to the team and ask us about that. We're happy to help, but this is how you can change that. All right, so a little bit more about the modules in the web design course. You'll see that we have the advanced HTML and CSS material here as well. This is where you'll really get into the learning about margins and borders and that whole box layout concept. And another project with Project Tell a Story, and then Bootstrap, designing user interfaces, and that final project. So as you're thinking about all this, one of the things I want to mention is that there's so many ways to really approach teaching with the web design course. So a lot of people will, especially if you're just getting started, one of the things you can do is just simply use the web design course as it is. It's a great way to not only teach your students HTML and CSS, but it's also a great way to teach yourself as well. That's absolutely a great approach to this. Following these modules through is absolutely fine to do this, to teach this course. What I will also say is that I know so many teachers who will grab pieces of this course and maybe teach a few of those beginning lessons first, so getting students into HTML and CSS. And then when they start creating that project, that's where things can really get in depth, and students have a ton of fun with being creative and really creating their own web pages. And at that point, sometimes the rest of these modules might not be as relevant to what they want to do. And so this is where you really have an opportunity to bring in your own ideas as well. So remember that all of you all have access to the sandbox, and all of you have the ability to actually create your own teacher websites as well. And that's where I'm going to bring in Kent Pendleton, because Kent is going to take us to that next level and really talk about, okay, so what does it look like if we want to use some CodeHS, some of those lessons, but what can we do with our custom activities as well? So you are going to love what Kent has to share. So Kent, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to you. Try to turn my video back on.
Hey everybody, I hope you can hear me. It is so nice to be with you. I love being here with my people. I'm the only computer science teacher at my school, and so it's a lonely life out here. And so to be with people like you guys is a thrill, and it keeps me out of the 103-degree heat today too. So I'm happy about that as well. But thank you for coming. I know you have 1,000,001 other things that you could be doing today. I noticed some of you guys were from really neat places. I remember seeing somebody from the Bahamas. What an honor that someone from the Bahamas is watching a video on web design. That's cool, because I bet there's a lot more fun things to do in the Bahamas. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Lori and Joni, thank you for helping me out today. And again, I appreciate it so much. What I'm going to do right now is just go ahead and take you to my screen, and let me pull that up if I can here. And I'm going to just talk you through how I normally do my work here at my job. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see if that comes up for you guys. Okay. Okay. So I'm assuming that everybody can see this right now. And so what you're seeing right here is what I see when I log into my CodeHS account. One thing that I'm very excited about, let me give you some context of what you're seeing here today. This is the first time this summer that I actually created my own course. I've been doing computer science, web design, all that kind of stuff for over 20 years. And so I have a lot of material that I've amassed through the years that I wanted to be able to use because I'm familiar with it. And I've been creating custom stuff before I did CodeHS. And when I integrated CodeHS into our curriculum a couple of years ago, I didn't want to get rid of all my stuff. So what's so neat is that you can create your own courses and customize them the way that you want within the CodeHS ecosystem. And so one of the course that I created and actually used this last week, and that's what you'll be seeing today, is some of the development sequence that I used in this process. I created what I called a Web Computing 1 course. And so this was geared for students that had no web background. They didn't know anything about HTML. They didn't know anything about CSS. They didn't know anything about JavaScript. And the intention is that I would give them kind of a overview of that triad of technologies, which would then lead them into a more programmatic environment. So CodeHS offers I think they call it video game design, something like that. And so I wanted an entry point for students to be able to go there, or to be able to go into maybe Python or Java or JavaScript. So you ought to know that I'm more of a programmer type person, but as you know, you can't program with JavaScript unless you get dabbling in a little bit with HTML and CSS as well. So that's a little bit of my mindset, is trying to get students on an on-ramp to the more programming area, but you want your websites to look good. And so that involves the idea of web design and making things look nice using the 3 technologies. So let me take you to the first place that I have got these lettered here, A through F. And so it's a little bit of a saga. And I always like to know what I'm getting myself in for. Okay, maybe you feel that way too. So I'm going to launch this A here, start, end in mind. And the idea is that sometimes it's helpful to know where you're starting from, where you want to go. And based on where you want to go, then you can start breaking things down and get to where you want to go. I am a real believer in this, and what I do is I like to do what I call reverse engineering. I like to show sometimes people the end product and then say, how do we get there? And you know, many students are pretty clever. They can go to the internet and find all sorts of cool things on the internet. And most of you know, we'll be looking at this soon, most of you know that you can go and look at source code many times for pre-existing sites. And so many times they're going to be seeing an end product and then say, how do I break that down into something that I could massage or make into my own? So anyway, what you're seeing here is an interface in CodeHS. I've got my assets over here that are this is the complete set of assets for this entire big project. So some of them are not pertinent earlier on, but they are used for what I call the grand finale. So this is an example here of the code editor. You see here that I've got a lot of really intimidating stuff. If you've never seen HTML and CSS and JavaScript, it can be pretty intimidating. And the point is not to intimidate you here, but just to show you where you can go. So I've got around 500, 400 lines of code here. And what do you do with this? Well, in the CodeHS environment, you notice here that I've got a file that's known as index.html. And notice it's kind of darkened here because you can choose the entry place for how you want your site to work. Now, on a website, normally the home page or the beginning is called index or default. And so that's what I've got here is the main file. But notice I can come in and click maybe something else, another web page. And notice I can say I would like that to be the main file. So you can choose, if you have multiple HTML files in your assets, you can choose which one is the entry point. But I'm going to keep index.html there as the main entry point. And you notice here on the right side, I've got 3 buttons. One is called Run, and it will open the web page up in a little sandbox area. And it looks pretty good. It looks like a minimized version of what you might see in a browser. Now, to get the full effect, I don't like to normally use this here alone. I like to go into this little thing here called Open. And Open will show us what the thing looks like in a real browser. So here you see the URL or the web address showcasing this particular thing. It's my sandbox name at codehs.me, index.html. And you can see this is what we had at the end of our adventures last week. So the idea is I wanted to show students starting from scratch how they could create something like this and see how the 3 web technologies play together in the sandbox, no pun intended, and do their thing with one another. All right. So the idea is that I've got a main page and I've got a nav bar here with some nice iconography. I've got what I call a little jumbotron, which is introduction to what we're trying to do. And then I like to think in terms of app design. So I had a couple little apps here that are really goofy that would showcase how we can use CSS and JavaScript in particular to do little tricks. So for example, one trick that is often difficult in the real world is getting your footer to stick at the bottom of your web page if you don't have a lot of content in what I'm calling the primary content area. Notice I've got a little bit of space here between these little app icons and my footer down here. And so what I'm noticing is, how could we do that? So I created what I call a little sticky footer app. And so I'm going to take you there. Now, remember, this is using 3 technologies at once, and our focus is not going to be on the JavaScript aspect of it, but I want you to see where you can go with this. And so if this, you've got free access to all of this code. So if you're intrigued by the JavaScript, that's cool. But what I wanted you students to see early on is that these 3 technologies work together. So for example, if I see that I've got this footer down here at the bottom, there's no content, that's awesome. And yet it's stuck down there at the bottom. And if I want to add some extra content, you can see I'm pushing a little button here, and I'm creating what I call digital vomit. It's a bunch of zeros and ones, which I think is really computery and really kind of fun. And this thing just intrigued the heck out of me when I first learned it, is that you can use JavaScript to influence and actually create content on your website, which I think, when I first started learning this, I thought that's so cool. You can create content on the fly. And I wanted students to see that early on, that this is something that you can do. And why wouldn't you? It's so powerful. And to show them the power of this little sticky app, I use a lot of really goofball retro kind of stuff. So some of you may recognize this as this little guy is Shemp Howard, one of the Stooges from the Three Stooges. And the idea there was, don't be a stooge in web design. Okay, we want your stuff to look as good as possible. And so here's Shemp. He doesn't look as good as possible, but I turn him into a little button. And I want you to see that if I were being a stooge here and I didn't use the sticky footer app idea from CSS, oh, look what happened. That footer moved up and it's crowding the content area of what I call the primary content. And you might think, well, so what? What difference does it make? But sometimes designers really would like to have the footer at the bottom and leave this area for content that's going to be emerging as people interact with the site. So you can see that this button also, I'm changing the fabric. Earlier it said stooge it. Now I'm saying, oh, let's de-stooge it. In other words, let's put that back in. And the idea is this, and this is what I tell the students early on. JavaScript can influence our designs as well. Not only can we use it to put junk inside the web page from a structural point of view, we can also use JavaScript to influence our CSS as well. And so I want them to know that starting out, and then we evolve into this. And so that was that little app there. So if I go back to my main page, the other thing that we did to showcase the three technologies is, this is a children's story called The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. And I've got a link there if you want to buy it at Amazon. The idea here was, in my Facebook adventures, about once a month, I'll see people posting things where they scramble content and say, can you read this? And the algorithm in there is, they show information where the first and the last letter of a word in a paragraph is the same, and all the other stuff is jumbled up in the middle. And they make reference to some kind of situation, say people have studied this and is it readable? And I think that's kind of fun. That's kind of fun. Could I do that? So we took this little story, and you can read it there if you want. And notice how it's been styled. I made it look kind of halfway decent using the technologies of HTML to showcase paragraphs and block quotes and things of that nature, which we may see in a moment. But if I click jumble, watch what happens. And again, notice the JavaScript is interacting not only with the HTML, but also with the CSS. So if you watch there, when I go jumble, notice these changed colors a little bit. The fonting changed a bit. It got a little bit bigger. And now you see that the JavaScript has actually interacted with the source code in the HTML, changed it, which I think is the coolest thing in the world. And you can see here that I've scrambled the middle of this web page, or scramble the middle of each of the words in the web page, and then reinserted paragraphing, or I'm sorry, reinserted punctuation. And isn't that the coolest thing? Now, again, I wanted students to see early on where you can go. And then from there, we're going to start. And but I do want to show one thing. I also like to show them early on as well that what are you getting with this triad of packages? For one thing, if I right mouse click any web page, I really like them seeing this early on, is you can go and view the page source. Now, if you didn't know this, this is like a superpower. I come in and I can actually see the source code of what has actually happened here within my page. And I think that is really awesome. So if you have a place, a web page that you respect, that you trust the content, you can actually come in and see how people did what they did. And at first, it's a little bit like watching a scene from The Matrix, in the movie The Matrix, where you're watching that weird stuff just falling through the screen, and the green and the black on the screen, and thinking this just looks terrifying. But with time, and I tell the students this, with time, you'll look at this and it will start making sense to you. And so, but I would like the kids early on to see, yeah, you can actually go and look at source code very easily without any problems whatsoever. The other thing I like them to see, now I use Chrome at my school, and in my notes, I've got some information about adding some cool extensions. Some of the extensions you can add to Chrome, one that I really like is the Web Developer Toolbar by a guy named Chris Pederick. There are a lot of web developer toolbars, but the one by Chris Pederick, and I've got that in my notes, is really a good one. It's this little gear here. And watch, again, this is almost like a superpower, because I like the kids to see the influence of the different technologies. I teach them early on, hey, HTML is like the structure of your web page. It's like the beams and girders and floor and concrete and stuff that's your building materials that you would use to make a house. And so you have to start with that. And the CSS makes it look pretty, but the Pederick Web Developer Toolbar, you'll notice I can come in here and disable all styles. And what I want them to understand is that, wow, structurally, there's not a lot to this. What if I'm taking inventory, what do I see? Well, I've got some images. I've got what looks like some hyperlinks. I've got some bulleted lists. I've got some headers of different sizes. I've got what looks like maybe some paragraphs. I've got a cute little button. I've got an underscoring line, a horizontal line. I've got some things that look like indented information, which we'll learn later as a block quote. Then I see that we've got another unordered list and another little picture. So from the HTML perspective, you don't have to have a lot going for you to take something that looks like this, and with a little bit of dabbling of CSS, you get it look like that. So I communicate from day one within the first hour that structurally you've got HTML that forms the backbone of your website. CSS is really the heavy duty player that makes things look attractive, because you and I probably know that if something doesn't look nice on a web page, you might go somewhere else just because it looks nicer elsewhere. And so having it look nice and dressed up looks kind of nice, and that's the role of CSS. And then I say the role of JavaScript is like it adds a behavioral element. It lets the dog do tricks, so to speak. And so where do we go from there? Well, having seen the beginning, then we want to start where we have to start. We have to start with HTML. And so that's what we shall do. So if I go back to my little sandbox folder, having seen where we're going, by the way, you've got all the source code of this, so you can steal it, you can study it, all that, and knock yourself out. But if you look here in my framework here of little sandbox things, B, framework start, okay? So I'm gonna go there. And it's loading. Bless its little heart. Now, once more, I'm in what's called the index file. Now, you will notice that there's lots of other things here that I just didn't want to take out because I'm lazy. And notice in the index, it's absolutely empty. All right, that's exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I guess I'm going to have to start with some HTML. And so this is what I did with my students. And if you want to type along with me, you're welcome to do that. If you want to just follow along and watch me, that's okay too. You've got the end game of this in the next version, but I'm going to just give you an idea of how I go about creating this from scratch. Okay. And if it looks like I'm making mistakes, it might well be because I am. And sometimes that's deliberate because I want the students to see what happens when you make some mistakes. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to tell them that things kind of work from a container perspective. And so I come in here and I write this weird thing here. So I'm going to click in there, angle brace, HTML, close angle brace, and I have them look at their settings. So in CodeHS, there's a little settings gear, and you can say whether you want things to auto-complete and things of that nature, and that's really nice. And so I have them yell at me if their stuff doesn't work the way that they see it working in my environment. So I'm going to click that and hide that. But I start by saying, hey, things work from kind of a container perspective in the world of programming web pages or designing web pages. And so I say the master container of all this is called the HTML tag. And I say a tag is just a framework of organization for a web page. And every web page begins and ends with what is known as the HTML tag. And so the beginning, I say these are like bookends. So this is like the left bookend, HTML, and then this is the right bookend, and you can see that it's a little different. And in fact, bless CodeHS's little heart, they have the autocomplete there. So if something has a matching bookend, if I type the left bookend, it will automatically close with the right bookend, and you can see it's got that cute little / there, and it's ready to go. So this is a whole lot of nothing. It will do absolutely nothing, but we're trying to frame out a structure that we can actually build on. So in the world of web design, I like to start from the idea of this containment. So anatomically speaking, web pages act like human anatomy in the sense that they've got what's known as a head area and a body area. So let's go ahead and put that in there. So I'm going to go ahead and notice, ooh, thank you, autocomplete. It's got the open head, close head. Notice it automatically tabbed over, and the tabbing is super important. This alignment helps us see the concept of nesting. And early, I want the kids to see that. If you're a Java programmer like me, you know how important it is to be able to see where things are located inside other things. It's urgent to be able to see that early on in your coding. It's true in Python. It's true in every other language. So I see I've got HTML as what is known as the parent tag. And then inside, I've got this little thing that's indented. And I would say that this is a child element of this HTML tag. In other words, it's contained inside. Now, where there's a head, there's also a body. So I come in here and I go body, and I instruct them that you want to use lowercase for your tags. In older HTML documents, you might see people using capitalized letters, but I believe that the structure these days, or the acceptable way of doing things now, is to use lowercase tags. Now, in this circumstance, you see that it's doing absolutely nothing for me so far. I could come in and save. And in fact, if I go and I run, nothing happens. Okay. Okay, good. So it would be really nice if we could have a few things in here that we could actually see some things happening. So in the body, which is where we start seeing actual stuff emerge, I'm going to come in and I'm going to create some main containers within the body. I'm going to go angle brace nav. And so I'm trying to get the students to see that there are sections within each of these big time elements. I've got the head, which we haven't put anything in there yet. I've got the body, and the body is going to contain the stuff that people see. Most folks expect to see in a web page, they expect to see some kind of navigation at the top. And structurally, HTML provides what they call semantic tags whose names give an indication of their function. So this little thing right here, most students would recognize, oh, that must have something to do with navigation. That's right. And so we're going to put some stuff in that in a moment. But right now I'm just framing some stuff out. So I've got the nav area in the body. The next thing that I like to add is I like to add what I call the main tag. Now notice, these are things, these are not words that I've made up. These are words that are part of the HTML ecosystem. In fact, whenever I have dead time in my class, maybe kids are working on a CodeHS assignment, and incidentally, one of the things that I do that works really well is I teach them this, what I'm doing with you now, I teach them this from kind of a, let's throw you in the deep end and teach you how to swim kind of thing. And I tell them, this is going to be a little terrifying at first, I'm kind of teaching you by immersion. Don't panic. I'm giving you what I perceive as how someone would do this in real life if they're creating a website under a deadline. Now, incrementally, that's where the CodeHS stuff with their creative computing class, which is something I also gave access to the students last week. They're learning from the CodeHS perspective, which is incremental. Let's learn a little bit about some tags. Let's create a body. Let's create a heading. Let's create a hello world program that says hello world on the screen. And that's very important and very necessary so they can learn things incrementally. But from my end, I'm showing them kind of a big picture idea where they see everything kind of happening at once. And so I say, if you're feeling a little nervous about this, that just means you're normal. I'm trying to help you see it from two perspectives. One is the incremental perspective with CodeHS, where you get you watch some snippets of video, you do a little exercise or a preformed exercise that CodeHS gives you that you can tamper with. And then you can do a couple of exercises based on those examples and practice in a baby step fashion. Here, I'm kind of throwing you to the wolves and let's just see what happens. So inside the body, I've got this nav area. I've got a main area. Now within this main area, I'm going to throw in a couple of other things. I'm going to throw in another tag called a div. I'll say, okay, what do you think if nav, what do you think nav stands for? Many students will say, well, it probably stands for navigation. That's right. They use an abbreviation, so we don't have to type so much. What do you think div might be? And they'll give me different things. And eventually some kid will come up with the idea, well, that sounds like that might be a division or something. And that's right. So if I have a custom thing that I would like to include in my webpage that's not got an already named semantic kind of name like nav or main, maybe I can create my own div. And because I want to make it stand out, I might actually give it an ID. So I'm going to come in and say ID equal, in quote. Notice it auto completes. And so early on, I'm having the students see, hey, we're writing these structural elements, but we might need to target them somehow. You saw earlier in the end game that we've got styles that can be applied to the nav bar and to the main body and to this introduction area that we're calling the Jumbotron. How are we going to get the computer to know how to target that stuff? Well, one way is to use what is known as an attribute. So an attribute is an equation-y looking thing that says property shall be assigned something in quotes. So property equal value. I say, if you see something like this, it's an element or part of a tag that lets you either target it for use with styling or with tricks with JavaScript, or it might actually allow you to give some insight into how it does its job. So in this case, I'm going to use a common name in the Bootstrap world called Jumbotron. Okay, so we've got an element and I'm going to save. Now, at some point, if kids have got some downtime, maybe I've done my lesson with them already. They've done their CodeHS lessons. You know, many students work at different rates, and I can have wild varieties of ability in age or wild variety in abilities of students. I've got wide age ranges. I can have freshmen all the way up to seniors. So they all work at their own rates. If you haven't seen this, this is a really great site. It's called W3 Schools. In addition to CodeHS, this is breaking down the ecosystem of web design and other things such as Python and PHP and Java and et cetera. And it breaks it down into little incremental tutorial lessons. And so if a student's finished early, they can go in here, they can go in little sandboxes and experiment with this stuff. And that seems to work, I feel like, very well. And so they can come in and they can actually learn about things, the different tags. In fact, this is one thing that I feel like should be stressed really early. It says HTML semantics. And so they're talking, and this is a relatively new feature that didn't exist. I don't know when that first was introduced. I feel like it was maybe 10 years or so ago, but they introduced what they call semantic elements whose name gives an idea of the structural service that this thing will do for you. So you've got a figure tag, which we use a lot in my classes. We've got a footer tag. And so rather than using these nondescript div tags where we had to customize things, HTML in the last 10 or so years added these extra semantic elements, and they explain how they're used here. So if a kid is wondering, well, how do I use the main tag? Well, there's an explanation here to let you see how to do that. So anyway, I just wanted you to see that you've got that resource. It's very, very nice. So in my main, I've got the Jumbotron division. Now, one thing I like to do also, if you were to go and look at some of the sites that are fairly complicated, and I may take you there in a moment, show you some that I've done. You can have divisions that span maybe 20 to 100 lines of code. And because of the nesting, this stuff can get really hard to read. So I come in often, if I know something could be fairly long and fairly complicated, I like to mark, especially with tags that are kind of generic like div. I like to come in and do this wacky thing. I like to go angle brace, exclamation, dash, dash, space, dash, dash, angle brace. And I actually will write that thing first, and then I'll fill it. I have a little hokey saying, write the container, fill the container. So many of you might recognize that that's a comment. And all languages support this idea of commentary where I can add stuff that the browser or the compiler or whatever thing is reading the code. These are things that entity ignores, but it's there for me to help me keep organized and help me see what's going on, or to make comments about things that might be important. So I'm going to say that this is end Jumbotron. So later, when I'm trying to fit something inside that Jumbotron or something that comes right after that Jumbotron, I don't have to scroll up saying, now, where does that begin? And sometimes your indentations can get messed up. And so marking the ending of these is kind of nice. And so I'm going to save this because I'm nervous. And so in the main, I've got my Jumbotron. And we would say that the Jumbotron div is a child of the main. Main is a child of the body. Kids think you're nuts when you talk like that. I say, no, I have a lot of weird terminologies, but actually this idea of child and parent is really important. And it's actually real professional dialogue to discuss how elements are related to one another. And if you know about CSS, which we haven't talked about yet, you know how important it is to talk about this stuff early on, because it talks about the relationship of one element to another. So I've got my Jumbotron div, and now I'm going to come in and create another little div here. And, hey, Mr. Pendleton, you create another div. Shouldn't we give it an ID because it's kind of generic in name? Yes, in fact, we should. So the idea is one of the first things I'll create as an attribute. So this one I'm going to call primary content, and this is just my terminology. It's the primary content of the web. It's of this web page. It's not introductory. It's not Jumbotron-esque. It's primary content. So I've got that. And then I'm going to come back in, and having gotten these two elements in the main, I've got a Jumbotron element, primary content. I could add some other things, but I'm going to come in and put in a footer. And notice the autocomplete is really nice. Notice how oftentimes, because I know it's going to be holding lots of information, I will often go ahead and bring it down to the next level rather than keeping them right next door to each other on the same line. And I'm always early on having the kids look at the alignment, making sure that things are nested in the proper way. I'll tell them things like, if you might get your code to work perfectly, but if your alignments are off, it's not possible to make an A+. You have to be the A+ kind of student, you have to have your alignments correct. So I've got my footer. Now I'm going to do a couple of other little things, and then I'm going to take you to the finished product of this and talk to you about some of the things without me having to type them out so much. So I'm going to go into the head. And in the head, now that I've got the main structural elements of my web page, I'm going to talk about the ones that are kind of super, super important. So one is the so-called title tag. And in this case, my title is going to be the thing. In fact, I will not tell them this. I'll actually type this in and say, okay, now you guys, I tell them this from day one. You guys are going to be you're going to be learning how to be a detective. You have to be able to ask the right questions. You look for clues. You're keeping your eyes open. You have to take a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense and see how to put it all together. In fact, I've got a big cardboard cutout of Shaggy and Scooby-Doo from the Scooby-Doo mystery series. They always wonder, why do you have that in here? Because I'm teaching you how to be a detective. So I'll type this in here, and in this title, I'm going to say, now it's in the head of the document, mind you, and I'm going to say this is web computing -1. I'm going to put a little pipe symbol, and then I'm going to say that this is my home. I won't tell them where this is coming from, and I go save. And then the other thing I'm going to put in the head right quick is, notice I'm watching my indentations. I've got my title. I'm going to put in something here called angle brace style, close angle brace. And then after that, I'm going to come in after that and go angle brace script, angle brace. And they don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm just saying there's some things that typically belong in the head of the document. That's the brains. It's going to be how the website interprets its scenario. The body is the stuff that people can actually see. And inside the style, I'll actually add something very often early on. I'm going to go /*/, write the container, fill the container. And I go in and go -- to make it stand out. And I'm going to say that this is welcome, maybe, to CSS, -- And then in the script area, I'm going to come in here and put in something like this, 2 // welcome to JavaScript, -- And they might say, okay, I'll tell them, hey, detectives, what do you notice about this? Well, Mr. Pendleton, it seems like things are changing color based on what you're doing. That's right. And in a good IDE and a integrated development environment, use color coding to help you see if you're doing things right or not. So notice these turn green. What do you think that means? And they might recognize that based on what I did down here, that might be some kind of comment. And I say, yeah, in the head here, we can go from talking HTML going into the idea of talking another language called CSS, which provided the styling. And then the script, this is an area where I can actually start writing JavaScript. And so early on, they start seeing, all right, if these 3 technologies have to work together, the HTML forms the structure, and then you've got pockets of styling, pockets of scripting, where you go into that world and it's like you're talking another language now. So I'll use the analogy in this that, hey, this is a little bit like going to San Francisco, where maybe in the generic area of San Francisco, which is in California, which is in the United States, maybe the majority of people speak English. But you can go into a pocket of San Francisco. I've never been there, but I've been told by students that have. There is a Chinatown area. And for all practical purposes, it might be that you like deposit in the middle of China, and you might meet a lot of Chinese speaking people. You might actually see a lot of Chinese signage. So it's like we're going into Chinatown here. So anything that's within these 2 tags is going to be a dialect of CSS, not HTML. And when we get into the script area, that's going to be a dialect of JavaScript, not HTML any longer. So it's like, hey, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. We're speaking different languages here. So even if we're not going to be spending any time doing JavaScript, I want them to know that sometimes the scripts have to be there early on so that the web page can do some initial kinds of tricks. But the other thing I'll show them is that down here at the bottom in the main, I'm in the main area. And notice I'm outside of the main. That / tag tells me I'm on the outside. I'm going to hit return. Notice it did auto indent or back indent, which is nice. So I'm still in the body. And so I like to come in here and put angle brace ! and then say developer scripts. -- angle brace. And I'll often make deliberate mistakes when I do this. I'll put a space in there where I don't need one. And I'll actually make some mistakes because I'm wanting the students to be able to catch the mistakes maybe themselves, or have the validator catch those mistakes, which we'll talk about in a moment. So after this, I'll come in and put as a framework angle brace script. And so I'm pointing out to them, hey, in a typical web page, then you've got a framework. I'm going to say, because I'm nervous, I'm going to run. And if I run it, I'm not going to see anything here at all, which is a little bit disappointing and a little bit disconcerting. If I open it up in the main area here, I'm going to actually just see the content from the head, which is my title, and that's it. But this is a shell or a framework that oftentimes I'll save in a special place and let the kids access to it so that they don't have to type this stuff out each and every time. It's a framework, that's all it is, and then we build on it. So I'm going to save this, and I could add a lot more to it, but let me take you to the finished product of this and talk to you about some of those ideas. So if I go over here, oh, by the way, in each of these, Lori put it out on the notes on the slides. In all of these areas, I put a little text file there called notes and observations. And what I tried to do is, as I was creating this stuff, I was thinking, what are the things I stress to the students? Well, I stress write the container, fill the container. You don't want to write things like start a nav and then start putting stuff in the nav without auto-completing. Now you say, well, now Mr. Pendleton, doesn't it automatically end that thing already? Yes, it does. But I always want to write some kind of shell, make sure it's correct, and then stuff it and make sure things are intended properly. Now, I got there also something that says aim at validation early on and use validator warnings to craft pages. Now, I didn't do that here, but I think it might be important to do that and show you what's going on here. If you were paying attention here, you might have been horrified at some things that I left out. There's nothing there to see what's going on. I'm going to actually save this thing. I'm going to open, and there's nothing there. Now, early on, what I like to do is if you see that this is opened up, there may be content that we see, there may not be, but oh, look, I see that little web computing one thing home. So at least the title thing did its job. This is worth its weight in gold if you're not familiar with this. I can come in and I can right mouse click that address and copy it. And then I have got a link to a place called the W3C Markup Validation Service. It's validator.w3.org. And what you can do, this is put out by the W3C, that's the World Wide Web Consortium. They're an international think tank that tries to help people follow good web standards. I can come in and I can paste that URL and I can say check. And it's going to tell me if there's any problems with my current web page. And you say, yeah, we've seen a lot of problems here. Okay, this is really weird. I like to see this within the first hour of coding, because let's use the available tools at our disposal to help us be detectives and find our problems find answers to our own problems. So I see here it's saying, okay, we checked this and then we've got, a warning. Okay, I know a warning's probably not as bad as a error. Let's go with the easy thing first. Where it says warning, it says consider a lang attribute to HTML start tag to declare the language of this document. So right away, I'm wanting them to start saying, hey, if you know how to call things by the right name, you have a distinct advantage. So they're talking about a lang attribute. What was that? Well, Mr. Pendleton, you were talking about the ID attribute, and they were equation-y looking things where you have a property equal to some value. Well, maybe that's what they're saying to add here. We need to say that we've got a lang attribute declaring the language. So, okay, well, I'm going to go back to my source code. Mr. Pendleton said that these attributes look like equation-y things that were in the opening tag. So I'm going to go to the HTML space, and I'm going to say lang equal. Now, if we had time, I actually have them go and look up in W3 Schools. It's called language attribute. Let's go and see if we were writing this in German, if we're writing this in Chinese. Can we find that thing? And so I have them to look. So I was, okay, first one, I have a candy dish in my room. Okay, first, in fact, this is fun. I have a bag of Smarties that I keep next to my desk. I had a bag of Nerds that I keep next to my desk. And so if a kid, they're the first one to answer, then I take out some Smarties and throw them out, and kids like that. I don't do dum-dums anymore. I thought I might get in trouble with that, but I use Smarties and Nerds. So some kids say, oh, I think it's EN for English. Yes, you're right. So it's EN. And I save. And then let's come over here and refresh our page, which is doing a whole lot of nothing. But if I go back and recheck, maybe the warning went away. Oh, it did. So right away, I have kids using the validator to guide them on how to fix code that's broken. So it says start tag scene without seeing a doc type first, expected such and such. So if you were on your toes, you might have noticed he didn't give the name, the dialect of HTML that's going on. Yeah, that was deliberate. I make a lot of mistakes, but sometimes they're deliberate. So I've got that doc type. Oh, look, I can just copy it. Copy. Let's go back over here to my source code. And so I explain that like all languages, HTML is a language, it evolves. And so there are document types that establish what ground rules are going to be used within the web page. And when you put this in there, it gives you a little bit more information to get help if you're having trouble. So I'm going to go save. And so now when I go back to my dear validator and check, oh, look, document checking completed, no errors or warnings to show. I really like that. And I tell them, hey, if you want to get the A+, your final projects have to validate. And sometimes if you want some fun, go to real life sites and see who tends to validate their stuff and who doesn't. It's a little bit of an eye opener. And kids will say, well, if McDonald's doesn't validate their pages, why do you make me do it? Because I'm the teacher and I want you to learn really good practices. When you're working for McDonald's someday as their web designer, you can do what you want. But I want them to have their stuff validate. And you might think, well, there's an HTML validator. Might there be a CSS validator? Yes, indeed, there is. And so we'll look at that in a moment. But I wish there.
Hi, it's
Yeah.
Jill. Can I throw this out here because this is pertinent to this specific topic we're talking on? So could you address, somebody asked the question, why are you using the validator? If it to them, it seems like it does the same thing as what CodeHS does when you try to run your program. Can you explain the difference between the two that's happening? That's
an excellent question. If you've been in the CHS, the CodeHS environment, you know that if you're doing an exercise, there is a checker. I think it says check the code, and it will go through and give little green highlights or red highlights as to issues that you have. My understanding, and Lori, correct me if I'm wrong on this, or Joni, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that's not a World Wide Web Consortium validation. That's the person that wrote that exercise. It's going through and looking at the actual document and saying, okay, we told you to write a heading and 3 paragraphs and include an image. It's going through and looking for, did they include those things? And so that validator is basically saying, did you meet the essence of the assignment, okay, that the designer of the assignment had in mind? And so, and by the way, that's the auto grader. So the auto grader is looking for elements that the designer of the exercise wanted to make sure that people have. But my understanding is many times those exercises are in kind of in a sandbox venue where if I'm working in the, say, the creative the creative computing course with CodeHS, you'll notice that they might not always put in the HTML tag and the head and the body tag. They simply have, okay, we're going to let you write only in a sandbox to make it easier for you. You can write a heading and then a subheading and a paragraph and an image, and you don't even need this other structure. And that's good for learning at a baby step environment. But I'm trying to show them that, hey, we're talking about real live web pages here. that actually exist on their own and not within the ecosystem of a child's playground at a school. And I actually used this analogy last week. In CodeHS, it's like we're in a safe school with a gated perimeter, and you're sitting there playing in the playground, and everybody's going to be safe and you're secure. We got video watching you to make sure you're safe. We've got staff people here making sure you don't do stupid things, and you can be safe. But the playground environment at a school is not the real world. Things are arranged there in a way that you won't have when you get out in the real world. I'm showing you stuff that's real world. And so the validator is the complete package, assuming you're going to go work for McDonald's, not frying hamburgers, but maybe being the web designer. And so I'm trying to get them to use what I would call professional standards of validation, not the validation that CodeHS is using that just basically says, yeah, we had 5 objectives for you in that assignment and you met all 5 objectives. In fact, if you watch carefully, you might notice that many times if a kid does a CodeHS exercise and then you take that final exercise to the validator, it might not validate, okay? And that's just because CodeHS, I think, is looking for things that, they're looking at other aspects of what the kid should be doing with an assignment. So I'd say use both, okay? Use both. And I hope, Joni, that answers that question. It's a very, very good question. So we use both of them. Now I'm going to go back to here. We've got this thing at validated now. Let's go back to my sandbox and let me take you to the so-called framework finish. So this, if I kept talking about this for a while, this is what we would come up with. And I'm going to save. And now you might be gratified to know that this time when I run it, I actually have some information there. Okay. So if I were spent another 3 hours talking to you, we would have developed this from scratch. But you can see if I look at the source code, I've got the doc type. I've got some header comments, which I think are important. Once upon a time, I worked as a what was called back then a Star Wars research nuclear defense initiative stuff. Woo. And I was given a notebook of code with no comments. I didn't know who wrote it. I didn't know what it did. And so I learned from that very painful experience that, hey, you give some header comments to explain who you are, the date, what the point is, et cetera. And my students that go off to university tell me that many times their professors do insist that you have comments. If you don't, you get a poor grade. Anyway, you can see that I've got my structure here, HTML, language, and notice I've actually put some stuff in the head. Now, this thing here, required meta tags, doesn't that terrify you? It terrifies me. I wish I could tell you everything that it does, but I can't. And I teach the students this, as sometimes we have to live with a little bit of ambiguity. I know that these so-called meta tags are doing magic behind the scenes. Among other things, it's making our web page more likely to be responsive. And that means that it's going to look good no matter you're either on a small cell phone or a medium cell phone, a tablet, or a big desktop. And responsiveness is a highly sought after goal in the web design world. And so if you do any research at all, you'll find that people need stuff like this there to get it to be responsive ultimately. And I tell the students, this is a little bit like, I use a lot of movie analogies. It's a little bit like Aladdin going in front of the Cave of Wonders and saying maybe magic words, open sesame. He doesn't know what that means. He just knows that it gets him in the Cave of Wonders. And if that's what it does, that's great. And this gets me in the Cave of Wonders. Now, there's some other things that I like to bring in that are kind of extras, like the fave icon stuff. Fave icon, you may know, is the little element that's the little decoration tag in the tab of the web, in the tab of the browser tab there. Like CodeHS has the cute little blue computer as a fave icon. And so I actually walk them through how to do that. Now, if you want to know how to do that, it's super easy. You go and pick out a picture. Like I see this little picture there, noun cloud optimization. And in fact, all of these are super nice. You get a preview in CodeHS. You can even copy the URL of where it lives. Or if I right mouse click that and say save image as, I could save it in a place that I know. And then there's a really nice site called faveicomatic.com, and that is in your notes. And basically, you upload that image, and it will create what is known as a fave icon for you, and it will actually create the source code for plopping it into your web page. So for example, if I were to go through those procedures, it will give me this source code, and I just plop it in my website, and I upload the resources into my web design area. Incidentally, if you're new to using CodeHS, this is really nice. Whenever I'm creating a lesson for my students, or or a lesson for my students, I don't just go with HTML. I go to there's an option for creating a web development ecosystem. And that lets you tap into lots of different things, including HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's not simply HTML. And so one of the things that you can do then is you can upload your own resources. So if I wanted to, I could upload an image. And so if I got that fave icon, I can upload it. I can also, if you have created files yourself from the past, I know some folks like I have used Dreamweaver. Maybe you have lots of old Dreamweaver files. You can actually upload those. You don't have to retype them in. You can upload them, all your assets there. But so my little fave icon, I can actually have a custom fave icon. Now also, I didn't do this for a long time, but I started having this kids find fonts that they like. I actually go and look at some videos on YouTube talking about good font choices. And we actually talk through a lesson of how to incorporate Google Fonts. One benefit of doing that is if you choose your font, once you've selected it, Google will give you all the stuff that you just copy and paste into the fabric of your web page within the head. I put little comments there to show, okay, this is my fave icon stuff. This is my Google Font stuff. But also the nice thing about this is that once you've got the Google Font in and of itself, this is tapping into it, but it's not utilized until you use some styling. So, and they actually give you an example of how to use it. So one of the first times I actually employ some styling is to show how I can bring in the Google Font styles. So I actually mark, these are Google Font styles. What would you like to apply them to? Well, I'd like to apply them to all H1s, H2s, H3s, and H4s. And the font family is the Acme family. And I include, and I think Google actually does this too. As you know, if you specify a particular font and for some reason people can't access it, then you provide a generic font called sans serif or serif, whichever you want, which is a generic family, and then it will tell the computer to provide a default font in the absence of something that it may or may not be able to find. So this is often the first time I introduce styling is through the idea of Google Fonts. And the thing that makes me encouraged about this is if I go and look at the framework so far, it's not a lot to write home about, but there's just something about seeing your own little fave icon up there in the tab. There's something about seeing your own little image right there. And there's something about seeing some kind of fun fonts that make your stuff look kind of customized. To me, it's energizing. It's like, wow, I'm actually going somewhere. I've only been doing this for a couple of hours now, and I've got some images. I've got a fave icon, which many sites don't have, which is a tragedy. And I've actually got some cool looking fonts, and I'm beginning to see a little bit about how styling works. The other thing that I'll mention here, if you look at this stuff here, there's some words that you recognize: web computing, link 1, link 2, a sweet start to web programming, immersive learning, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And then look at this. Isn't this weird? I'm going to embarrass myself by not being able to pronounce some of these words, but energistically enhance viral schemas through one-to-one app. What's all that? Well, in the notes, I mentioned 3 little extensions that are super wonderful. I showed you the web developer one by Chris Pederick. There's another one called Colorzilla, which will let you sample colors in a web page and also give you the triad of colors that make it, called red, green, and blue tints. Or if you're like hex code, it gives you the hex code. It also gives you hue, saturation, and brightness values, and will tell you many times how to use those colors. And by the way, W3 Schools is good at doing that too, but I can sample colors. But this other one is called Corporate Ipsum. Now I use Corporate Ipsum a lot. It's a little thing here. When I click, it will generate however many paragraphs you want of mumbo jumbo from the corporate world. And so this makes no sense, but it keeps me from having to write a bunch of stuff. And it looks like actual text that you might see in a real web page. And I talk about how professionals use this. I might be writing, I used this analogy last week. You might be writing a web page for a doctor's office. You don't know anything about medicine. That's their job, is to come up with the information or the copy for the paragraphs. But you can actually put in placeholder text without having to write a bunch of stuff yourself. And the nice thing about this is, if you're familiar with the history of what is called lorem ipsum, which looks kind of like Latin filler, that will often trigger spell checkers, and spell checkers go berserk if you've got lorem ipsum. But because these are English words, the spell checker is not triggered. And then you'll notice there's another paragraph there with sugar. I've got a sweet tooth here. Sugar, plum, caramels, jelly, whatever. That's another site that I give to my resources. It's called cupcakeipsum.com. And I'll actually have kids go here because I want them to see, isn't this a cool looking site? It's very inviting. It's almost certainly written with JavaScript. They've got some nice looking styling here. What happens if I remove the styling? Oh, okay, look. They've got their pretty pictures. This looks pretty crummy. Look what a wonderful job CSS is doing for us here. Would you like to see how they did it? Well, let's come in and look at the source code. So early on, oh, that's hard to read because I don't have the wrapping thing on. But the point is, I can go and look. If I like what I see, maybe I can steal some of the ideas. But at any rate, you can say how many paragraphs of Cupcake Ipsum you want. You can copy it, and then you can incorporate that into your web page. So that's what's going on with all of that stuff. Now, let's move on and look a little bit more at the structure. We're beginning to get into the idea of styling. And what I try to do is teach them that you style from the top down. Big things first, generic styles, and then we get into the nav bar styles, the Jumbotron styles, the content styles, the footer styles. And so there they see the framework, and slowly but surely I'm filling that framework with content. And so I come down here. Now here, I actually wanted to put something as JavaScript here. And I do this even though some kids will never go into programming, just because I think it's important for them to at least see it, is that have you ever been to a web page and you're not sure whether what you're learning is current? It would be nice if when you go to a web page researching stuff, because you're a detective, it'd be nice if you knew, hey, when was this page last updated? Well, I thought, let's put in the current date. And then down here, I look at the bottom of my source code. Remember, we wrote a little section there, developer scripts. And I threw some extra stuff in here too, just to show you how we did it. I talked early on about the idea of responsiveness and how we would like to know sometimes how big the browser is to know when we should make decisions about changing things, whether to go from a 2-column design to a 1-column design. This is actually a bootstrap idea that I stole, and I like it. And so, for example, if I come in here and look at what this script is doing for me, it's reading information about my document. It's giving the window the ability to listen to changes in the size. And then when the body loads, I'm actually calling this little function here, and it's going to be reading my last update, inserting it into the fabric of the web page, and actually telling me how big the browser is. So when I actually look at that live and I refresh, you'll actually notice here that it's saying browser window size 1920. And if I come in here and I start changing that browser size, notice that's changing dynamically. And I'll actually spend maybe an hour talking about that. And what I'm trying to do is whet their appetite for saying, wow, maybe that's something I want to take in the future. And I was very gratified, in fact, that this last week, a couple of kids said, you know, I wasn't going to take any more programming. I've met my requirements that the school has for coding, but you think there's still room in the JavaScript gaming class? Oh, I bet there is. And so that's very gratifying when that kind of thing happens. And I think part of it is because I throw them in early to see just what they might be able to do even early on in the game. So there's my browser. Also, if you'll notice here, I put in this little bar. And if you'll notice, as this thing changes, as the browser side changes, that color changes. Well, yeah, there it is. It's blue, yellow, orange, red. And what's going on there is a kind of a shout out to Bootstrap and the idea of media queries. So if you look up here in the head, I talk early on that we can put styles within the fabric of our web page, but we can also call them as external styles as well. And so I actually gave them this. It's called media queries. I'll just give you a peek. I stole this from some Bootstrap stuff. And basically it's saying, hey, I'm going to give the ability to the web page to listen for the size of the browser. And based on criteria that it meets for having a minimum or maximum width, I'm going to target the nav bar and change the border bottom color so that I can see what the breakpoints are for the sizing of the browser. And these are all from the Bootstrap environment. In fact, one thing that you'll notice here in this document, and I teach the kids this as an important skill, a development skill. All of us, if we're coding in a robust way, in a more professional fashion, we're going to have to look stuff up. I tell the kids, web design is a lot like cooking exotic cuisine. We're in a well-staffed, stocked kitchen. And maybe there's certain things I can make from scratch without thinking about it. I like spaghetti, so I can make spaghetti sauce from scratch. No big deal. I haven't looked anything up. But, I like Thai food, but I don't remember how to cook Thai food. So I need to look stuff up, and I do it all the time. Now, let's suppose I find something that's super helpful, and I might want to reference again in the future. If I find something that's helpful, I actually put it as a comment within my source code so that later, if there's problems or I need to look further at the idea, this little comment right there is telling me, hey, this is where I got the idea. BS5 stands for Bootstrap 5 breakpoints, and I actually coded those out. So if I want to take this site and make it bootstrapian in the future, at least I kind of know what the breakpoints are. So that's kind of what's going on there. If I, wrong page. If I go back over to the index page, if I look at some of the other things that are going on, you can see that I've added some hyperlinks within the nav bar. And so, in fact, early on, I will actually go to a Bootstrap site with navigation and mimic some of the stuff that they do there. And very often what you'll find is they have a nav bar or nav element with a division. I call it nav links with an unordered list with list items that are housing anchors. I generally will teach my introduction to hyperlinks in the context of unordered lists and list items, because so many times in real life, you see hyperlinks in a cluster. And if you go back and think about our very beginning page, let me just see if I can get there again right quick. Our very beginning page, start with the end in mind. Come on, load up. Oh, look, hyperlinks. We're all familiar with seeing them at the top. And structurally, many times these hyperlinks are housed in unordered lists with list items. And so I teach that structure early on. And once I've developed it there, then kids can implement copy and paste, put it as the footer. You can see it's almost exactly the same idea there. And that's done with some fancy styling, which we may or may not be able to get to today. So at any rate, I know that they're going to see hyperlinks in isolation with the CodeHS stuff. I know that they're going to see unordered lists in isolation with list item stuff, but I want them to see it like they would see if they open up an actual web page. This is probably what they would see from a professional level. Going down into the main, you can see that I've got just nothing more than some hyperlinks. And notice occasionally I'm going to throw in some divisions. Now, I teach them to have a special way of naming things that's kind of their own particular footprint. If you're a coder, you might know the terminology of camel case, where camel case is a way of naming things without any spaces, where you have the first, if you have multiple words, you have the first word all in lowercase, and every subsequent word has a capitalized letter to start those things. And that's kind of an industry standard. And so I'll teach them that. So as we name these things, I grade them also on their name choices. So a lot of them like to be cutesy pie about stuff and give oddball names, and that's the kind of grade they're going to get. So what is JT text? Well, Jumbotron text. Now, why would I want to put that in its own div? Well, maybe I want to style all text that's within that div a certain way. And the more structures you have with IDs that are meaningful, the more ability you have to style things later. So particularly if you go to Bootstrap, you'll notice that they use a ton of divs just for this very idea. And it can add a little bit of complexity to things, but it gives you more ability. Let me see if there's anything else that I'm wanting to showcase here. If you look at the main page here, once it's run, you'll notice that I've got my headings, I've got my paragraph, and then I do have this little thing that says, where I lost my place. I say paragraph class equal lead. And that is not there. Now, I like to bring in classes really quickly because in Bootstrap, which is it's kind of like CSS and JavaScript on steroids that makes your web page quite responsive from the get-go. To give you an idea, if you look at some of these things, by the way, this is something that I've used that's very helpful. Early on, I put all the links to the stuff that we use regularly actually in the web page that we're working on. And I also have it to where if they go to the HTML validator, for example, when they click on it, it opens up a fresh page and keeps the other one there open it opens up a separate page, for example, and I show them how to do that. But that way, I'm not always having to have them fumble and find these things. So you see, I've got HTML5 validator, I've got CSS validator, W3 schools. Now, these two sites, TNT and TNT Sandbox, are sites that I've developed over the years to show students how what we do works live. Now, with COVID, I let TNT kind of go into a state of disrepair for a couple of years. TNT Sandbox is a less polished one, but I've been updating it. And I'm going to just take you there for a moment because I want you to see something. I used to say mean things about Bootstrap because I felt like kids should be able to write their own CSS, own JavaScript to do everything from scratch. And I liken it to the idea that, homemade ice cream is always better than stuff you buy at the store. Isn't it powerful to write your own or to create your own homemade ice cream and you can flavor it the way that you want? But it is a lot of extra work when you can go and buy some Ben & Jerry's or some Bluebell. And so Bootstrap keeps me from having to worry about all the details of the responsiveness, of which there are many problems with that. There are many things that are difficult. So for example, to show you the power of Bootstrap and why you should learn it, if I go here to some text-based apps, all of this is written in Bootstrap. Now watch what happens. As I start changing the size of the browser, notice how the text changes. And again, notice I've got an overpopulated nav bar there with lots of links, but at some point I reach one of those breakpoints I was telling you about. See the colors? I hit a break point, and now it goes to the so-called, pun there, hamburger menu. You know what? I've written these from scratch, and it takes a week, and it's very difficult to keep up. And even then, you're not happy with it. Why not just use Bootstrap? And this is, by the way, Bootstrap 5. Within 15 minutes, I've got this working, and it's so much easier than writing it from scratch. Do I think that they need to know HTML and CSS and JavaScript in isolation and write things from scratch? Yes. But as quickly as I know that they kind of got that, I want them to get into Bootstrap pretty quick. But watch what happens to my little tiles here. As I go and change my tiles, notice how they kind of responsively change and stack up differently. I can do that, and I have done that, and it's a beating. It's so much nicer when you can do it with Bootstrap. The other thing that was really nice, this was actually a project that I did in the web development course that Lori was mentioning earlier. I believe it's the Picasso. Do I have that right? I think it's the Picasso course. So I supplemented it. And so the kids were given another children's story. And so they were given the text of the story, and then they had to style it. Now, this is in Bootstrap, and the nice thing about this is, watch, if I've got enough space, notice the story is gone 2-column. And now when I come in and make it a little bit smaller, like it would be on a actual tablet, smaller tablet or cell phone, you can see that it's gone 1 column. All of you, I bet, could do that. And, you know, you'll give up your summer vacation working on it. Bootstrap makes it pretty easy, although there's a fairly steep learning curve with Bootstrap. So I'd say start learning it as fast as you can. And let me just mention one other thing that Lori said as well. I agree that probably one of the most underutilized aspects of CodeHS is probably where you can write your own website. So down here, I've got a link that says Tech Tools Guru. That's the one that I created. So when I don't have time to actually manage I've got a hosting agency and all that stuff, and I've got to transfer things over. If I'm in a hurry, this is really nice. In fact, I use this as a way of communicating information to the students about stuff that we do. So if we're doing something about resources online, I wrote a little page for it. There's resources that we often use. And so I'm trying to use good styling techniques here. In fact, we developed this in the web development class from scratch. We created a table, and I don't remember, frankly, I don't think we used any Bootstrap here, but you can see that all the things that I've mentioned so far, many of them, CodeHS, of course, W3 Schools. Incidentally, this has been well worth the money I spend. I think it's like $99 a year. It's called the Noun Project. The Noun Project gives you iconography, hundreds of thousands of icons. Nearly all of the iconography you see me use is coming from there. And when you have a membership, you can use these images without attribution. And it saves me hours of work, because used to I'd go scour the internet for a picture and then have to clean up the picture with Photoshop. And Noun Project, to me, is worth its weight in gold. You can see some of these other things I've mentioned already. So, but anyway, if you like what you're seeing today and you want to explore, this is a great way to do it, because they give you a little sandbox so you can start creating your own web pages. You can validate them, catch the mistakes with a validator, and before you know it, you start growing things. So I think that's kind of cool. Now, let me go, lost my place.
Hey, Kent, quick
Yes.
note. We are at about 11 minutes left for time.
I saw that, Lori. You mean we're not going till 3 today?
I
thought
know.
I had it till 3.
I think people are wanting you to go till 3.
Just
But
kidding. So thank you, Lori.
and we do have a
understand.
couple of questions too.
Sure.
Once you,
I'll let you decide how we wrap up, because they've got all the source code. So you tell me what we would like to do to finish up.
Tell you what, if there's anything you'd like to talk about here yet, go ahead. And then once you're ready, we'll go ahead and answer those questions.
Okay. Just to point out to you guys that, let me get back to my sandbox here. Make it larger. So we had gotten in our little thing here up through the framework finish. And then you see here, I've got a little thing called preliminary styles. And so if you wanted to try your hand at some stuff, here's an entry point. And you could try your hand. The focus here was more on some CSS kind of stuff. Like, how could I get this thing to go horizontal? How could I get different colors to showcase the different areas? All of those things are there. And so if you wanted to start playing with it, then you could go to the preliminary styles finish. It will show you how I attempted to do those preliminary things. What I will say is, by using these semantic elements, such as the nav bar, the Jumbotron in the main, the primary content, along with the footer, the benefit of this, if I go to the CSS or go to the finished product, you could try your hand and see just what you can accomplish. But just with a little bit of styling, not much, I think it's very satisfying to see what you can get. Notice when I open, wow, it looks quite different. And that's just with a little bit of styling. So I started with a nav bar, just worked my way down. And so you too could start with the starting place, see if you could come up with your own styles, and then go and look and see how I finish that up in the finish, and experiment, play. And there's really no better way. You have to actually go in there and come up with a concept that you're interested in, and then just start experimenting with it. There really is no substitute for that. With Lori, I do see that we've got about 7 minutes left, so I'll let you direct traffic from here on.
All right, sounds good. And I'm going to just put the CodeHS team on notice too. You might notice it's a little dark here, and I'm a little bit laggier because we do have a storm rolling through. So if I drop off, Joni, if you can just pick up where I left off, that'd be great. So let's hit those questions first. So from the question parking lot, Kent, one of the questions that I'm seeing right now is, how do you build student vocabulary for HTML and CSS for middle school students? Is there any strategies you use for helping students develop vocabulary? Oh, you're muted, Kent. You're still muted, Kent.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I put myself on mute, and I only taught middle school for 1 year, and that's not really my hat off to anybody that teaches middle school. I didn't know if I was going to survive, but how I develop vocabulary for my students is I'll actually have them create a vocabulary list, and we actually make it into a web page. So we'll create a table, an empty table, and they'll have a column where they say the term, and then they fill out and write out in the second column, they write out their own definitions. So that will be kind of a running tally. In fact, I did that with tags. I said, as you encounter a tag, I want to see it in your list. Tell me how the tag works, and then tell me how you use it. So that would be the vocabulary that I would use. Also, another excellent question. I mean, that's an excellent question. The way that I develop a lot of sorry, they're doing construction across the hall, and if you're getting some feedback. One way I develop vocabulary is using comments in my source code. So I'll actually, if they're coding, I actually give my notes to them in the context of the web page. And I'll say such and such below is an example of an attribute. The attribute has a parts of property equal value. It looks like an equation. So I actually dictate to them and type out for them commentary within the code. And that serves as a way of taking notes and hopefully also develops the vocabulary. And vocabulary is super important because as they're Googling stuff, if you can call things by the right name, you're more likely to find hits for what you want. Like if I can say tag attribute, then I'm more likely to find gold with respect to the attribute that I'm looking for. But that's a really good question.
That I love those strategies. I especially love the idea of adding it right into the code. I think that's an awesome idea. Let's see, we had another question. How does Kent use CodeHS to access student work for grading purposes? As he just mentioned, are there other apps to use? He uses to speed up his program to program grading. So can
That's
you
also
talk
a
a
very
little bit
good
about
question.
your strategies?
I use CodeHS to do the evaluation. And on final projects, the other thing I might do is I'll take their code and open it up in the web browser and then see if it validates. And then I'll get them feedback that way. Again, I'm sorry if you're getting feedback. I didn't know they're going to be tearing the room apart across the hall, but oh well.
We can still hear you.
Okay, very good. So yeah, I will use the validator to help me assess their work in addition to, but for the grading, I use exclusively the CodeHS stuff.
Excellent. Thank you. And one more question, I think, and yeah, let me know if I'm missing one here. How can I connect HTML, CSS with PYP, learner profile, or key concepts? Or how can I integrate web design with PYP?
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Okay.
Is that something, Laura, that you know about?
It's something that we can definitely look into and get a better answer to.
Okay.
So we will do that.
I don't know that I would say anything meaningful at that point on that question, but
No
thank you for your question.
worries. We thought we'd throw that out there and see, but perfect. We'll do a little more checking on our end and get back to you. So it's perfect. And I don't think, Joni, you're done. Did you see anything else? I think we got everything.
All the questions that were in the parking lot.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We've got 3 minutes left, and I'm going to show you just a few links. I'm going to try to share my screen. I have grown even laggier with the storm that's going through, but we'll see if I can get through the last 3 minutes. So we have just a few more resources. And for those of you who've joined us at other workshops, you've seen these, but I want to make sure just to talk about them briefly. Make sure you're checking out that list of workshops that are available. That's going to be found at codehs.com/freepd. We were talking a little bit about that in chat. There is a web development workshop on Tuesday next week, and that one is going to be led by one of our curriculum developers. And it's going to be an awesome look at the web development course. I definitely recommend you checking that out. And just as a side note, Kent, we're also having a little discussion in chat about, we really just need a part 2 to what we're doing today. So I may have mentioned that we might have been talking about that. So just putting a bug in everybody's ear. Kent and I have already been talking about it. Keep an eye on codehs.com/freepd. And we'll keep you posted. I'll also see if I could maybe send out a message to you folks so you see specifically that more is coming from Kent.
No, Laura, I would love to do that. This is like taking a drink out of a fire hydrant, and I apologize for that. It's like there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of details, but I am so grateful that you guys hung with me. I'm so appreciative, and I hope that this has whetted your appetite, and I would love to do more if given the chance.
Awesome. And you will definitely be given the chance. So lots of opportunities for Kent. And there's also been a lot of love for Kent in the discussion or in the chat today. So just wanted to mention that also. Now, if we want to keep the networking going, which I think is also, and this is going to be another way we can get out that information about upcoming workshops, definitely join the CodeHS community on Slack. This is a community that is starting to grow a lot. Absolutely join that Facebook group, but join the community on Slack as well. And if we can, and I don't have my chat pulled up, I apologize, but the link is probably in chat, and it is.
Yep, I got you.
Cool. Thank you, Joni. codehs.com/community-connect. And that will take you out. If you don't have a Slack account, you'll be able to create one and join that community. There is a web design channel there as well. So if you'd like to congregate in that channel, you definitely can. And there we go. Our next workshops that are coming up, and there's gonna be a little bit of a break in there too. So our next workshop will be next week, Tuesday, July 12th, and it will be teaching web development. I definitely recommend that you attend that one. And hopefully you're all hearing me yet. I see my video froze. Okay. So definitely head out and register for teaching web development. Then on Monday, July 18th, we start up again with more of the free workshops. And by that point too, there's going to be more posted. So keep an eye on that page. But on the 18th, we'll have Teaching Fundamentals of Cybersecurity for Experienced CS Teachers. And that one is being led by Joe Thompson. And if you haven't gotten a chance to attend any of Joe's workshops, he's another phenomenal teacher trainer. You will definitely want to register for that. And more workshops are listed at codehs.com/freepd. And one more link, if you can please take a moment to fill out our workshop survey. We would love to know what you thought. And also what else you'd like to see. Want to see more Kent? Put that in the survey. We can definitely talk about any ideas that you have there. I know I want to see more workshops from Kent. I feel just as inspired as you all do when I attend his workshops. So head out to codehs.com/workshop survey. Take a moment to fill out the survey. And I think we're at the end of our workshop. And I made it to the end, even with no power. So woo. And I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, CodeHS team. Thank you, Kent. This was amazing as always. I learned a ton. I feel inspired. And now my conundrum is I don't want to work. I want to go and work on my website, but I'll work. I want to make sure to get this out to everybody. So I will work. But thank you, Kent. This was amazing. We so appreciate it. And there truly was a ton of appreciation and love for Mr. Pendleton in the discussion today. And thank you, CodeHS team, for all of your help on the back end. We had a lot of people in this workshop. And so we were all kept hopping during the workshop, answering questions and making sure everything was good. So thank you. And teachers, thank you. Thank you for choosing to spend 2 hours of your precious summertime with us today. We appreciate you. We appreciate all you do. And yeah, we thank you is not enough, but we will just keep thanking you. Know that we are here to support you however we can. Don't hesitate to reach out with questions. And we are definitely looking forward to seeing you at the next CodeHS workshop. See you all soon, everybody. Have a wonderful day.